Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Astral Chain. This game is quite underrepresented, but it does have a ravenous fan base that quite frankly scares me, so I have to be very careful of what I say here. Now, this game is made by Platinum Games, and if you are one of my longer time followers, you will know that we actually covered another one of these guys' games called The Wonderful 101 Remastered. And I have played a little bit of Bayonetta, so I feel like as far as Platinum Games goes, it's like the root of all of these games is very similar as far as like combat goes and dodging and that kind of thing, but then each game kind of seems to have its own twist. Not necessarily like a gimmick, because that sounds kind of negative, but like it's got its own thing. So as far as like the Wonderful 101, you're controlling 100 of these superheroes. In Astral Chain, you are playing as a human, but you are chained to a demon. So as far as the plot goes, it is a very fun and unique plot. I enjoyed it quite a lot, actually, and it takes place in 2078. You're gonna have to forgive me because I'm going to get a lot of this terminology incorrect and maybe some of the more minor details incorrect, so if I could get some actuallys in the chat, I would appreciate it. And it's kind of like this apocalyptic world where on Earth, basically these portals started opening up into a different dimension called the Astral Plane, and these demons started coming out and they started grabbing humans and taking them back to their own dimension, and there's just corruption spreading from these portals. Things are not looking good. So in order to save humanity, we make a man-made island called the Ark, and we move everyone there and we build up this mega city, and we're just hiding from all of these demons. And for a while that actually worked. We were able to rebuild up a society, and we're just not concerned about the rest of the world. That's just all taken over and doomed. So we're just gonna survive on the Ark. Well, portals eventually started appearing on the Ark, and so demons start coming up and wreaking havoc once more, and so humanity is then faced with extinction. And so how do you fight these demons coming from the astral plane? Well, you chain them up and make them your slaves and have them fight the wild demons for you. Now, these demons themselves are called chimeras, if I'm not mistaken, and so we created an astral chain and a legion, or I think maybe the chimeras are called legions once they're chained up to the astral chain. I'm not too sure on the specifics, but we have developed this machine to capture these demons to fight for us by chaining them up to the astral chain. It basically makes them like our own mindless zombie slaves. And being connected to these chimeras is actually pretty beneficial because, one, chimeras are invisible to the normal human eye, and so you can't even see these things to fight them. Another reason why they are beneficial, besides their fighting abilities, is you can use a chained up chimera to pull you through a redshift. These are like the portals that take you to the astral plane in order to rescue the humans or fight the chimeras on their own turf and do all that stuff. So at the beginning, you have a choice between two characters. Both of them are twins, and I believe the one that you don't choose is named Akira. Now, I chose the male, and so I think that the story is going to be the same whether you pick the male or the female. And then as far as like how the story evolves from there, the one you didn't choose is just the one that does all of the talking, because this game has a silent protagonist, which I absolutely hate. I think on a narrative side, I think it's really dumb. I kind of get where game developers are coming from by giving you the silent antagonist, because it's just like you're supposed to be putting yourself in their shoes. That's who you are, like, and so your twin kind of does all the talking for you. But obviously they must have had some sort of male voice actor do all of the talking parts if I chose to play as the female, right? So just have the main character talk. At this point, I kind of understand why The Legend of Zelda doesn't have Link talk, because it's just tradition at this point. It would be weird if Link talked, but when you're making like a new IP, just have the main antagonist talk. I don't care if I am not connected as much to this character. From a narrative standpoint, I think that the story would flow a lot better if the male also talked when I was playing as him. So these two twins, they joined the police force. They are adopted. We don't know who their parents are, and their adoptive father is like one of the head guys on this neuron project for the police force. There's only like a couple of people that have the Legion, and they're attached to the Astral Chain with these chimeras fighting for them, and one of them, the like head boss guy, not the head boss, but the head of the task force is your father. So I think that kind of influenced the twins to join the police force, and eventually they too can start wielding the Legions and the Astral Chain. Now this game is separated in terms of files, so instead of chapters, it's files, and as you play through each one of these files, it is kind of separated into two separate phases. One part, the part that you usually do start with, but not always, is the detective phase. Now this is where a lot of people's gripes probably come from about this game, and I have some things to say about it too, but basically you are playing the friendly neighborhood police guy. This is where you do most of your side quests, and this is where most of the world building will happen, where you're just going around this city and you are talking to guys who basically have like an exclamation mark over their head, and you help them out with a task. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that you're fighting though. Sometimes you're just doing friendly neighborhood cop things, like sometimes you're helping find a lost cat, or sometimes you are tracking down a thug, or just a bunch of little things like that. Sometimes there's like mini games where you have to solve a puzzle, or one where you're carrying a stack of boxes and you have to balance it by using the gyroscope on the switch, so you kind of like tilt the switch left and right to balance this stack of boxes. Lots of stuff like that. And while I don't necessarily mind that phase, I felt like the whole detective phase lasted way too long in terms of detective phase and more like the combat phase. I felt like a good 50% of it was doing this extra side stuff, just helping out guys, picking up trash and throwing it away for bonus cop points, and just tracking down criminals, that kind of thing. So if that sounds kind of boring to you, a major chunk of this game is doing that. Now I wouldn't mind that whole detective phase so much if I didn't absolutely love the combat phase of this game. And most of the time, not always, same as the detective phase, you will be doing most of your combat in the astral plane. Now this is where you fight all the bad chimeras, and there's also some platforming in this, and some light puzzle solving, nothing like Legend of Zelda or anything like that. And I actually feel like I could do away with the platforming and the puzzle parts of this game. For one, there's no dedicated jump button, so in order to cross between two hovering platforms, you're going to have to send your Legion out to that other side and then have him pull you over. And it just feels clunky, and I lost a lot more health from this platforming and Chimera Astral Chain pulling than I did actual combat. And I just feel like we could do without that. And now you do some other stuff with the chain, like you use the chain to pull objects together, and you have to use your different kinds of chimeras in order to interact with puzzles. So I guess I should get more into that, where you are allowed to have 5 of these chimeras. Now it's not like Pokemon, you can't choose or anything like that. As the story progresses, you unlock different legions. So you start out with the Sword Legion, and he has this ability where he like slashes electrical lines and that kind of thing. Or you'll have the Beast Legion, which you can ride, and he can sniff scents to hunt down things, or he can dig. Or you'll have the Arm Legion, and he's really strong, and he's good at like pulling blocks and stuff like that. So you're using these different legions for the combat, but also the puzzle. Like the aforementioned Arm Legion, you're going to be using to pull around these blocks in order to put on switches and that kind of thing. So I want to say about 50% of the time you're doing this detective work, about 10% of the time you're doing this puzzle stuff, and only about 40% of the time you're doing combat, which is a real bummer, because the absolute best thing about this game is the combat. I loved it. At first, it took some kind of getting used to, just as far as like the controls and everything like that, especially because you have such long spaces of non-combat in between the combat phases. It's kind of like, wait, what button do I press to manipulate this? And then you have to cycle between all of your different legions depending on which one you want to use during the combat phase. But once it all clicks, it is wonderful. You can cycle your weapon between 3 different weapons. You have your one-handed baton if you want to get in like these quick strikes. You have this two-handed long sword, which that's kind of like my weapon preference, is like a big, slow, strong hitting weapon, and that's the one that I use. Or you have a gun for like the flying characters. And so you kind of have to manipulate like which chimera do I want to have out, which weapon do I want to have out, and then you unlock different abilities for each of your legions and your own character. And so you have to be like, okay, so this legion's out, so I want to use this ability, and it does take some getting used to, but once it clicks, it just feels awesome. There's a lot of things you can do with this Astral Chain. Before it sounds too complicated, though, that it kind of like turns you off to the whole thing, your legion is going to auto attack enemies, so you don't have to worry about that. You can completely just ignore what your legion is doing and just kind of do your own thing, and then maybe just activate the legion's abilities when they're off the cooldown. But there are some pretty cool things that you can actually do. For one, you can move your legion around, and you can do some cool things like wrap the Astral Chain around the enemies to like pin them down to the ground. Or if an enemy is going to charge at you, you can kind of make this bungee line going across to kind of fling him backwards like a wrestler would, and just knock him off of his feet. So there is some cool manipulation stuff that you can also do with this Astral Chain. Now there's RPG mechanics as well. You can upgrade your weapon to do more damage. You can upgrade each of your legions, and they all have their own different skill trees and their own abilities. You can attach passive effects to them. You can even customize the color of your legions and yourself, change out your costume. Lots of different appearance stuff you can do as well, if that means anything to you. I do wish during the combat there is a finishing move where if you ever played a game like this, if an enemy is low enough health, then you can do like this little execution move. Unfortunately, even if you are using different legions, the execution move on these enemies is always the same. You basically just send your legion to latch on the enemy, and then he like tugs out the core of the chimera, and it's just the same animation over and over again. So if you like using those executions, just be prepared to see that same animation. Because I love the combat so much, and it was obviously the best part of the game, I really wish that there was some way to just like join an arena and just duke it out with chimeras and just battle and practice and really hone my skills and grind that XP, because there's no way during a normal playthrough you will be able to fully max out all 5 of your different legions. So I wish that there was just some way to grind. Now you can replay these files, but then you have to play through the whole like detective phase as well, and each of these files, there's 12 in total, 11 to roll the credits, and then there's like a little bit of post content as well. And each one of these files is about like, if I was to guess, they're all varying lengths, but maybe like 45 minutes to an hour and a half long. And if you don't feel like just playing through a whole file over again, I just wish there was some way to just hop into the arena and grind out XP and really practice your skills, just because the combat is so enjoyable. Maybe like some kind of boss rush mode, I don't know. There is a training mode where you can just practice against like holographic chimeras, but this doesn't net you any rewards like XP or gold. As far as the difficulty goes, this is kind of interesting, where it starts you off on casual mode. So you can change at any time, even at the beginning of the game, but by default it's like, okay, we're gonna start you off as casual mode. So I didn't know if that was the mode that was intended, that the developers wanted just basic like normal people to play as, because I always play on the default difficulty mode that games start me out on. But after about the 4th file, I was like, yeah, this is way too easy. I'm not even flexing or anything like that. I don't think I'm that great at video games, but once I bumped it up to standard difficulty, I thought that it was just perfect. It was like the perfect amount of challenge and engagement, and there's no hard mode, I think, until you beat the file, and then you can replay the file on hard mode, but I could even see myself going back and replaying them on hard mode. Now, I kind of do wish that it just started you out on the standard difficulty, because on casual difficulty, you don't get graded, so that doesn't like really show up on your end game scorecard, I guess, and I don't know if that really matters. I don't think you get like any better rewards or anything like that, but because I played through those first 4 files on casual mode, I didn't get graded. So after I rolled the credits, it's like, okay, this was your final grade on all these chapters. The first 4 were just blank, which just a little minor gripe. Now, if you're a little worried that this game, it sounds too hard or too complicated, even on casual mode, there's a ton of different options and accessibility here where you can basically just say, like, play the game for me. I just want to watch it kind of like a movie or a visual novel. And there's just a ton of different checkboxes like auto attack, auto use skills, auto do this. And there's just so much variety here. So you can definitely play it to any kind of difficulty playstyle that you wish. I just found that standard was the perfect amount for me. Now, as you're playing through, it definitely incentivizes exploration, especially during the detective phase. There's a lot of collectibles that you can gather, like cats and toilet paper. Let me just kind of explain, because this game does certainly have like a quirky kind of humor. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely like heavy hitting and very serious when the plot demands for it. But when you're just going off the beaten path and just exploring, there's some funny humor here. And I noticed this a lot in The Wonderful 101 as well, especially more there than here. But there's like a cat sanctuary where you have to find these cats who don't have a home, and you send them to the sanctuary. Or in the like main HQ of Neuron, this is the police department that handles like all of the chimeras and legions and everything. There's a toilet fairy where you have to turn in toilet paper to the toilet fairy, and you get rewards there as well. And then the Neuron actually has like a mascot known as Lappy, who is just like this big dog, and kind of like McGruff, the police dog. So just some quirky kind of humor there as well. Even the vending machines themselves have a lot of humor and different personalities. You'll come across like one of the vending machines, and it'll be like all sassy, like, "What do you want? Oh, just window shopping? Quit wasting my time." Or you'll come across like a really sad one, like, "Yeah, thanks for buying it." And just like tons of different variety. And I definitely recommend, just even if you're not intending to buy or sell anything, go talk to some of the vending machines, because they're pretty entertaining. Now, in terms of visual aesthetics, I kind of wish that they would mix it up overall. Now, this is definite, like, there's definitely exceptions when playing this game, but visually it's all pretty samey. You're either in like a populated city, like metropolitan kind of area, or you're in the Astral Plane. And the Astral Plane, while it does look cool, especially your first time going in there, it's a lot of these like floating glitchy cubes with like these neon lines running through them, and it's all very red, and there's like these cube particles floating everywhere. It reminded me a lot of actually the Twilight Realm in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, and visually it was pretty cool. But you're just bouncing between this metro city area and this red astral plane full of these shapes, and I just wish they kind of mixed it up here a little more. Now, they kind of mix up like the more human populated areas a little bit. For the most part, you will be playing in a city. Now, as far as the astral plane, I get that like red is very much the color of the astral plane. Like you're cleaning up all this red matter corruption as you're playing through, and the enemies are red, and they're blue to show that they've been subdued and connected to the astral plane. So I kind of get that color choice, but I wish they found some way to mix up the variety of the astral plane itself in particular. Like maybe sometimes you go in and it's green or blue or yellow, and maybe it's not all squares and cubes. Maybe this time it's pyramids, or just like some way to kind of change it up every now and again, because I just got bored of playing through the city and the astral plane, just bouncing between the two. As far as aesthetics go, music I liked a lot, actually. Even at the beginning of the game, it had this whole musical track with vocals, and it was very anime, and that's kind of like the whole tone of this game. It's just so 90s anime, and I'm all for it. When you're in the middle of like this big boss battle, this electric guitar will come, and you're just kicking butt, and everything's just flowing so well, and the combat's so enjoyable that the music just completely backs it up, and it really hypes you up, and it's just like this really cool electronic music. And then maybe when you are back at HQ, or when you're doing more of your police detective work, it'll be like this more like mellow kind of vibe, some like lo-fi going on here. It's a very enjoyable soundtrack, and I think they did a good job on it. By the end of the game, after I rolled the credits, it said that I had played this game for 19 and a half hours, and then there is a 12th file that I mentioned, which is just kind of like some post-content to play through if you're not quite ready to be done, just like side quests and that kind of thing. So I played around with it for a little bit. So I want to say it's just a little bit over 20 hours. I didn't 100% complete it or anything like that, but I did do a majority of the side quests that I could find, and obviously I would hunt down these collectibles collectibles and stuff, because this would also get you achievements to unlock different like customization, like colors for your legions and that kind of thing. So definitely incentivized to go and look around. But yeah, 20 hours, and I easily feel like I could have put in another 20 if I wanted. I felt like maybe even a part of me was like, you know what, maybe I just play as the girl this time and do a fresh run all on standard difficulty and just see how this goes now that the combat's really clicked. But I gotta move on. I have too big of a backlog to do something like that. Now, admittedly, I always kind of rolled my eyes when reading comments about Astral Chain, how good it is, how amazing, and everyone just champions it, and they're so passionate about it. And whenever I read about that, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm sure it's fine, you know. And it was kind of a big ask, because it's like, this game never goes on sale, and it's just like, well, I don't know if I really want to try this. People say it's good, but I don't know. I don't know how well it did commercially or anything like that, but I gotta say, I'm really glad that I finally was able to purchase this game, especially because I feel like it's kind of going off of retail shelves. You can still buy it online, but it's not like you can go into Target and just see it on the shelves and snatch it up. I actually had to look pretty hard to find my copy. So what I'm about to say, you might feel like I'm exaggerating. I can't definitively say that this is the best Switch exclusive game, but I definitely think that it deserves to be in the conversation. This game is a absolute 5 out of 5 for me. I love the combat, I love the tone, I love the uniqueness of the plot, just everything about it. I could definitely see myself replaying this again soon when I finally clear up that backlog. Yeah, right. But guys, like, when you do read good things about this, it's not an exaggeration, but it is a big barrier of entry where it's like you have to drop that $60 in order to play this game, because it never drops on sale, and 2, you kind of have to give it like 4 or 5 hours for the combat to really sink in and the plot to really become more understandable and to really hook you. And I actually really do hate when people say like, oh, just play 4 or 5 hours before you decide if you really like it. It should be like, no, you start it immediately and you should know if you're gonna like it or not. But I really, you know, I just gotta push. I'm gonna push you. Like, once you kind of tolerate more of the detective phase and the combat really sinks in on like just the flow, and once you like understand everything, it just gets so good and enjoyable. And I you know, maybe somehow if you could like rent this game or something like that, give it a good 4 or 5 hours, and I think you'll be one of us. I think eventually you'll be championing the game just like me with all of these internet strangers, because it really is a fantastic game, and I don't think that it gets enough attention. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know what you think about Astral Chain, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!